Picture a river, quiet, patient, eternal, flowing for millions of years, grain of sand by grain of sand, until it has sculpted one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. That is the official story. That is the bedtime story printed in every geology textbook on the planet. Now picture that story being a lie. My name is Mr. Deductive, and what I am about to show you are 12 places on the surface of this earth where the ground itself is screaming at you. Not whispering, screaming. There were no slow processes here. There were no millions of years of patience. There was water, apocalyptic, continent-swallowing, sky-tearing water, and it arrived so fast that living creatures never had time to be afraid. Established geology explains every single one of these scars with gradual processes: erosion, tectonics, glaciers, time. But the physical evidence at the crime scenes tells a terrifyingly different story. We are going to travel from the bottom of the ocean to the highest mountain peaks on Earth. We are going to see flooded cities, shattered coastlines, and ocean creatures frozen in solid rock 2 miles above the waterline. And by the time we reach number 1, the discovery that cracks the entire geological timeline wide open, you will never look at a map the same way again. Stay first, because the first clue changes everything. If you are sick of the official, sanitized, academically approved version of Earth's history, hit that subscribe button right now. You are now part of the 1% of curious minds who actually demand real answers. Let's begin. Number 12. The Grand Canyon, Arizona, USA. Established science tells us the Colorado River spent 5 to 6 million years patiently carving this colossal trench. Slow erosion. Nothing unusual. Move along. But the physical evidence tells a terrifyingly different story. Stand at the south rim and look down. 277 miles long. Up to 18 miles wide. Over a mile deep. And those walls are not smooth and rounded the way you would expect from millions of years of gentle water flow. They are sheer, vertical, brutal, fractured. They look like something ripped this planet's crust open with its bare hands and drained an ocean through the wound in a single afternoon. Here is the thermodynamic problem that established geology quietly ignores. The Colorado River today is a thin, sluggish trickle compared to what would be required to excavate 4.7 trillion cubic feet of solid rock. The math simply does not work. The volume of sediment that should have been deposited downstream from that erosion event is enormous. Geologists have been searching for it for over a century. They cannot find it. It is gone, vanished. Alternative catastrophists point to something called a spillover event, the sudden, catastrophic draining of an ancient inland sea called Lake Hopi, a massive reservoir trapped behind a natural dam for millennia. And then one day, that dam fails. Not slowly, all at once. A wall of water hundreds of feet high, carrying the kinetic energy of a nuclear detonation per square mile, tears through the Colorado Plateau in a matter of weeks, maybe days, and carries every grain of sediment straight out to sea before it can settle. Established geology calls this a fringe theory. But I want you to ask yourself one simple question. If a river carved this canyon grain by grain over 5 million years, where are the grains? Because the evidence on the ground does not show us a patient sculptor. It shows us the aftermath of a catastrophic drain event so massive it left a scar visible from space. Number 11. The Channeled Scablands, USA. Number 11. The Channeled Scablands, Eastern Washington State, USA. This one nearly destroyed a man's career. Because when geologist J. Harlan Bretz looked at the terrain of eastern Washington in the 1920s, he saw something that made him physically sick with its implications. Textbooks tell us landscapes form gradually. Valleys deepen, channels widen. Rock weathers to soil over thousands of years of incremental change. But the channeled scablands look like God took a pressure washer the size of a continent and blasted the topsoil clean off in a single afternoon. We are talking about 16,000 square miles of stripped, scoured, naked basalt bedrock, an area larger than the entire country of Switzerland, where every single centimeter of topsoil has been stripped down to raw, bare, ancient rock. The channels cut into this bedrock are not river channels. They are catastrophic flood chutes, hundreds of feet deep and miles wide, carved with a violence that leaves geologists speechless when they actually run the numbers. And then there are the ripple marks. This is where it gets truly disturbing. If you fly over the scablands at the right altitude, you can see enormous ripple formations in the earth below, like the ripples you would see in a sandbox after dragging your finger through wet sand. These ripples are 40 feet tall and 300 feet apart. 40 feet tall. The only physical mechanism on this planet capable of forming a ripple 40 feet high is moving water. An enormous, incomprehensible, apocalyptic volume of moving water traveling at speeds that would shred a freight train to pieces. Established geology eventually conceded to Bretz's theory that these scablands were carved by a catastrophic glacial outburst flood when an ice dam holding back ancient Lake Missoula failed suddenly, releasing half the volume of Lake Michigan in a matter of days. But here is the question they still cannot answer. What broke the ice dam? And why? According to layered evidence in the rock, did it break not once, but at least 40 separate times? 40 floods, 40 catastrophic drain events, all in the same geographic region, all leaving the same apocalyptic signature in the rock. What kind of force keeps reloading that gun? Number 10. The ice-rafted erratics. Willamette Valley, Oregon, USA. Here is a mystery that should appear in every geology textbook on Earth. Instead, it appears in almost none of them. Scattered across the hills of the Willamette Valley in Oregon, hundreds of miles from any mountain range, you will find enormous boulders. Isolated, alien, completely out of place. Some of them are the size of a small house. Some weigh over 160 tons. And when geologists analyze their mineral composition, they are forced to admit a staggering truth. These boulders originated in Montana and Idaho, hundreds of miles away. Textbooks tell us glaciers transported these boulders slowly, dragging them across the landscape over thousands of years. But glaciers grind rocks. They crush them. They pulverize them into gravel and dust. Glaciers do not gently carry 160-ton boulders hundreds of miles and set them down intact on hilltops. What does carry a 160-ton boulder and deposit it whole on a hillside? An iceberg. And what do you need to float an iceberg carrying a 160-ton chunk of Montana granite hundreds of miles inland into Oregon? An inland sea. A temporary, catastrophic, unimaginable inland sea covering the entire Pacific Northwest to a depth of hundreds of feet. Alternative researchers argue these erratics are not just evidence of the Missoula flood. They are evidence of something even more terrifying: the repeated, systematic, violent reflooding of the entire northwestern interior of the North American continent, over and over again, by a force so powerful it kept coming back like a slow-motion planetary execution. Established geology says these are just glacial deposits. Just ice. Just time. But a 160-ton boulder sitting alone on an Oregon hilltop does not whisper slow process. It screams catastrophe. And it has been screaming that for 12,000 years, waiting for someone to finally listen. Number 9. The Black Sea Catastrophic Flood. Turkey, Bulgaria, Ukraine. In 1997, two oceanographers, William Ryan and Walter Pittman from Columbia University, published a study that quietly overturned everything we thought we knew about ancient human civilization. Official science tells us the Black Sea has always been as you know it. A large saltwater sea. Stable, quiet, unchanged for millennia. But the physical evidence from the floor of the Black Sea tells a terrifyingly different story. Approximately 7,600 years ago, the Black Sea was not a sea. It was a large freshwater lake, sitting 150 meters below the current sea level. People lived on its shores, building homes, farming the land, raising children. It was fertile, productive, living land. And then the Mediterranean broke through the narrow land bridge we now call the Bosphorus Strait. What followed is what Ryan and Pittman called the Great Flood. By their calculations, water poured through the Bosphorus with a force 200 times greater than Niagara Falls. Every day, the level of the freshwater lake rose approximately 15 centimeters. Every day, the shoreline retreated inland by a kilometer. Within a matter of months, 155,000 square kilometers of fertile land, an area larger than the entire state of Florida, was swallowed by the sea. And hundreds of thousands of people, if not more, fled with nothing but their lives. Researchers have found freshwater mollusks on the floor of the Black Sea, submerged river valleys, ancient shoreline remnants, and what appears to be the remains of human structures, 150 meters underwater. Some alternative historians argue this single event is the origin of the great flood legends shared by virtually every civilization in the Middle East. That Noah is not a metaphor. Noah is an eyewitness to a catastrophe that actually happened. And the evidence of that catastrophe is still sitting on the bottom of the Black Sea, right now, waiting for us to take it seriously. Established academia tries to soften these findings. Maybe the flood was slower, they say. Maybe smaller. Maybe people just gradually relocated. But 155,000 square kilometers of drowned land is not a maybe. It is a fact. Recorded. Underwater. Right now. Number 8. Doggerland. The North Sea, between Britain and continental Europe. Imagine a land the size of Great Britain. Fertile. Green. Inhabited. Forest rivers. Marshlands teeming with game. People have lived here for thousands of years, hunting, fishing, building their world. Now imagine that entire world is underwater, directly beneath the sea that modern ferries cross today between London and Amsterdam. This is Doggerland, and it is not fiction. Official science willingly acknowledges it. Yes, Doggerland existed around 8,000 years ago, and yes, it flooded gradually as sea levels rose after the glacial maximum, a few centimeters per year. Nothing dramatic, nothing sudden. But the physical evidence tells a terrifyingly more violent version of this story. Approximately 8,200 years ago, a submarine landslide occurred off the coast of Norway, an event known as the Storegga Slide. A section of the continental shelf covering 3,000 square kilometers collapsed off an underwater escarpment. The displaced mass of rock and sediment, enough to bury Great Britain under 50 meters of debris, fell into the Atlantic and generated a tsunami. The wave that reached the shores of Doggerland is estimated to have been over 25 meters high. It crossed the coastline with a speed that gave coastal inhabitants no chance at all. North Sea fishermen regularly pull evidence of this lost world up in their nets from the deep. Mammoth bones, rhinoceros teeth, flint hand tools, fragments of ancient trees. This is not just rising sea levels. This is the drowning of an entire world. At once. So fast that people did not have time to take even their tools. Alternative researchers asked the uncomfortable question. If Doggerland is just one of the drowned regions under the North Sea, how many other Doggerlands are hid? Number 7. The submerged ruins of the Gulf of Khumbat, India. In 2001, the National Institute of Oceanography of India was conducting a routine survey of the seafloor in the Gulf of Khumbat. A sonar-equipped research vessel silently swept the water at a depth of 40 meters. And then the instruments showed something that took the scientists' breath away. Beneath the water stretched perfectly rectangular forms. Straight lines. Symmetrical structures. Things that do not exist in nature. Things that can mean only one thing. Someone built here. Further investigation revealed ruins stretching 9 kilometers along a submerged riverbed. Artifacts recovered from the site, including pieces of wood, were submitted for radiocarbon dating. The results stunned even the skeptics. The age of the finds is approximately 9,500 years. Official science has largely ignored this discovery. Those who have not ignored it say, maybe it's a natural formation. Maybe the dating is wrong. Maybe it's something much younger. But sonar imagery does not lie. Rectangular structures. Right angles. Evidence of urban planning. Under 40 meters of the Indian Ocean. If this is truly a city built 9,500 years ago, it existed when the official timeline of human civilization was only just beginning. And it went underwater long before Egypt built its first pyramid. Established archaeology guards its neat, tidy timeline of civilization's origin. Mesopotamia 6,000 years ago, Egypt 5,000 years ago, with the same ferocity that the medieval church guarded the flat earth. But 40 meters of salt water do not lie. They simply wait, in silence, for someone to finally ask, who built this city? And what destroyed it so suddenly that the buildings were never taken apart? Number 6. The Messinian salinity crisis. The Mediterranean Sea. Imagine the largest canyon on Earth. Larger than the Grand Canyon. Larger than anything you can picture. A canyon 3 to 4 kilometers deep and thousands of kilometers long. Now imagine it is hidden under mud and water, directly beneath the Mediterranean Sea that yachts and tourist liners cruise across today. This is the Messinian salinity crisis, and it is one of the most explosive geological events in the history of this planet, one that official science has been quietly trying to normalize for decades. Approximately 5.96 million years ago, at the end of the Miocene, the Mediterranean Sea became cut off from the Atlantic Ocean. A massive land barrier closed the Strait of Gibraltar, and the Mediterranean, covering 2.5 million square kilometers, began to evaporate. It almost completely dried out. It became a vast, scorched, poisonously salty basin, sitting 3 to 5 kilometers below the level of the world's oceans. The rivers that had poured into the former sea, the Nile, the Rhone, the P, cut new channels for themselves, carving straight down through bedrock to unimaginable depths. That is where the subterranean Nile Canyon comes from, a 3-kilometer deep gash beneath modern Egypt, cut by a river that was falling into a void. And then, approximately 5.33 million years ago, the Gibraltar barrier broke. Official geologists say this happened gradually, over thousands of years. But the latest research suggests the breach may have been catastrophic. A waterfall kilometers high, pouring into the empty basin with a discharge exceeding all of the Earth's modern rivers combined. Estimates suggest the entire Mediterranean may have refilled in anywhere from a few hundred to a few thousand years, and some models suggest far faster. Every ecosystem that had adapted to the desiccation annihilated. New seawater poured over the top of it. Established geology calmly describes this as a normal geological process. But I want you to understand the scale. 2.5 million square kilometers of empty void, filling with a waterfall from the Atlantic. If humanity had existed in that moment, none of us would have survived to tell the story. Number 5. The Siberian craters. Yamal and Taimyr Peninsulas, Russia. In 2014, a helicopter pilot flying over the Yamal Peninsula in Siberia saw something in the ground that must have made his jaw drop. A perfectly circular, deep, black hole in the earth. No warning. No visible cause. Just a hole. Up to 50 meters deep. Up to 30 meters wide. Walls as smooth as polished glass. Since then, dozens more have been found. And the numbers keep growing. Official science has an explanation. Thermokarst, or gas explosions. Underground methane, sealed beneath permafrost for millennia, heats up, pressure builds, and the ground explodes. Nothing unusual. But the physical evidence tells a terrifyingly different version. First, the scale and near-perfect geometry of these craters does not match typical gas explosions. Natural explosions leave ragged, chaotic terrain. These craters are precise, almost mechanical. Second, the number of craters is accelerating, which means the permafrost is thawing at a rate that fits no gradual model. Third, and this is the truly terrifying part, beneath the Siberian permafrost lie enormous deposits of methane clathrate, an ice-like substance that traps vast volumes of methane in a crystalline lattice. If this substance begins to decompose on a mass scale, the methane release would dwarf anything in recorded history. Alternative researchers point out, these craters are not just a local problem. They are a symptom. They are the first visible signs that the permafrost, which has kept flash-frozen mammoths and rhinoceroses in a state of perfect preservation for thousands of years, is beginning to thaw, all along the Arctic belt, simultaneously. And if what lies beneath it is truly that entire flash-frozen ecosystem we described earlier, what happens when the ice that has kept it locked finally lets go? Number 4. Lake Titicaca and the marine fossils of the Andes. Bolivia, Peru. If you climb to 12,500 feet above sea level in the Andes and look closely at the rock faces surrounding Lake Titicaca, you will see something that causes a short circuit in any honest geologist's brain. Frozen remains of deep ocean seahorses, marine shells, ocean plankton, sea creatures, locked inside rock, nearly 4 kilometers above sea level. And the lake itself is a staggering anomaly. For an inland Andean lake, it is unusually salty. It is home to marine organisms that have no business being there. Bull sharks, seahorses, crustaceans typical of ocean environments. The shoreline of the lake is tilted at an impossible angle, as though the water level shifted suddenly and unevenly. Official geology explains this as tectonic uplift. The Andes slowly rose from the seafloor over millions of years, and the lake rode up with them. But here is the physical problem that established science quietly skips over. Millions of years of slow uplift means millions of years of gradual changes in pressure, temperature, and water chemistry. The delicate marine organisms whose remains we find in the rock would have died and decomposed long before they reached 12,500 feet in altitude. For a delicate seahorse to survive preserved in rock at the top of the Andes, the uplift had to be catastrophic. Rapid. So rapid that the organisms had no time to decay. Alternative researchers ask, what if the Andes did not rise over millions of years? What if a section of the ocean floor was catastrophically and instantaneously thrust kilometers upward by some planetary event, so fast and so violent that the seawater and everything living in it was hurled upward and frozen before it could flow back down? This is an impossible theory. Official geology dismisses it. But seahorses at 12,500 feet also seem impossible, until you are standing there looking at them personally. Number 3. Catastrophic glacial outburst floods. Scotland and the entire North Atlantic. Picture a glacier. Enormous. 2 kilometers thick. Spreading thousands of kilometers from the Arctic down to the middle of the North Atlantic. And inside it, gaps. Depressions. Giant lakes of fresh water trapped by the ice like water in a jug. Then, a crack. Not slow melting. A crack. Sudden. Catastrophic. The scarred rock surfaces of the Scottish Highlands are not a metaphor. The valleys of Glencoe, Loch Ness, Loch Lomond, they look like they were cut by water, not by erosion. Cut. With a savage, inhuman force that the rock still carries in its face 12,000 years later. But Scotland is only one piece of a much larger puzzle. Official geology today acknowledges, yes, glacial outburst floods occurred. They even gave them a name, Jökulhlaup, the Icelandic word for a sudden glacial flood. Perfectly domesticated. Nothing to panic about. But here is what the established sources quietly leave out. These floods did not happen in isolation. Over a period of several thousand years following the glacial maximum, from roughly 15,000 to 8,000 years ago, the entire North Atlantic experienced wave after wave of catastrophic outburst floods. Ice dams broke. Lakes merged with oceans. Sea levels lurched upward in pulses. Estimates suggest that during this period, so much fresh water poured into the ocean that the average salinity of the Atlantic dropped measurably. This disrupted the thermohaline circulation, the system of ocean currents that regulates the climate of the entire Earth. And the climate responded. Sharply. In years, not millennia. Established geology calls this normal climate variability. But a 5-degree cooling of the North Atlantic over a few decades, after thousands of years of warming, does not look like variability. It looks like a reset button being pressed. And the rock faces of Scotland, stripped to the bone, still bear the fingerprints of the hand that pressed it. Number 2. The New Siberian Islands. Arctic Ocean, north of Siberia. In the early 1800s, explorers mapping the desolate Arctic Ocean north of Siberia reported a discovery that sounded like a frostbitten fever dream. They found an entire archipelago, the New Siberian Islands, that appeared to be constructed almost entirely out of frozen, shattered bones. It was not just a graveyard. It was a landmass built from the remains of vanished giants. The permafrost of these islands is literally a matrix of ice, sand, and an unimaginable quantity of mammoth tusks, rhinoceros horns, and splintered skeletons. Geologists estimate that in some areas, the very soil is up to 80% biological material by weight. 80%. The ground is made of dead things. The thermodynamics and logistics of this mass grave are entirely baffling. These islands sit hundreds of miles north of the Arctic Circle, a frozen wasteland completely devoid of the vast vegetation required to feed millions of multi-ton herbivores. Yet their remains are piled so densely they form actual hills. For millions of massive animals to be pulverized, swept into the freezing ocean, and flash frozen into a solid landmass before they could rot or sink. We are looking at the unmistakable signature of a continental-scale tidal wave. A wall of water swept them up, carried them north, and snap froze them into an island of bones within a matter of hours. Orthodox science tries to explain this as the result of gentle seasonal river flooding, slowly washing carcasses downstream over thousands of years. But slow-moving rivers do not build islands out of undecayed, flash-frozen flesh and shattered ivory. Slow-moving rivers scatter bones. They do not stack them into hills 80% biological by weight. The new Siberian islands stand as a frozen monument to a day when the oceans rose up and the sky froze over. And they have been standing there, silent and patient, for 12,000 years, waiting for someone to ask the right question. Number 1. The Younger Dryas boundary layer. Worldwide, from North America to Europe to Asia, there is a hidden scar on this planet. If you dig down to exactly 12,800 years in the sedimentary record anywhere on Earth, in North America, in Europe, in parts of Asia, you will find it. A thin, unmistakable, dark line hiding in the dirt. Below this line lies a vibrant world teeming with millions of massive prehistoric animals. Mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, woolly rhinoceroses, American horses and camels. Evidence of ancient human settlements across the entire North American continent. Above this line, nothing. Absolute silence. This is the Younger Dryas boundary layer, a black mat of ash, soot, and microscopic nanodiamonds that serves as the ultimate proof of a planetary reset. The evidence screams of a cosmic impact. Approximately 12,800 years ago, it is believed a fragmented comet slammed into the northern hemisphere's ice sheets. The thermal detonation instantly melted the glaciers, unleashing continent-spanning megafloods that swept up the mammoths, the rhinoceroses, and the redwood forests, churning them all into the Alaskan muck. But the heat was only the beginning. The impact kicked millions of tons of ash and water vapor into the stratosphere, completely blocking out the sun. What followed was a catastrophic, near-instantaneous refreezing of the planet. The vaporized ocean fell back to Earth as an apocalyptic blizzard, plunging temperatures to absolute extremes and flash-freezing millions of drowning animals mid-breath. Skeptics long dismissed the impact hypothesis as myth, attributing the black mat to routine climate shifts. But the presence of impact glass and nanodiamonds leaves no room for debate. Nanodiamonds form in only one context, under detonation pressures on the order of hundreds of gigapascals. That pressure exists in only two places in nature, inside the cores of stars, and at the point of impact when a large cosmic body strikes a planetary surface. No glacier, no slow erosion, no climate shift. None of those processes produce nanodiamonds. Ever. Under any circumstances. The Earth was struck. The megaflood was real. The flash freezing was real. And every single scar we have examined today, from the Grand Canyon to the new Siberian islands, points back to that thin dark line in the dirt. The planet is not a slowly ticking clock. It is a ticking bomb. And the frozen giants beneath our feet are desperately trying to warn us. We walk around thinking we are the masters of this environment, completely oblivious to the fact that carved into the rock beneath every one of our cities is an army of warnings left by millions of creatures who thought exactly the same thing, right up until the button was pressed. 12 scars, 12 crime scenes, and every single one of them points to the same verdict. The Grand Canyon with its missing sediment. The Scablands with 40-foot ripples carved in stone. The Oregon hilltops with 160-ton boulders from Montana. The drowned world under the Black Sea. The lost land of Doggerland under the North Sea. The city of Kumbat under 40 meters of the Indian Ocean. The Messinian Canyon beneath the Mediterranean. The Siberian craters opening like wounds in the permafrost. Seahorses locked in Andean rock at 12,500 feet. Scotland's valleys cut to the bone. Arctic islands built from the bones of millions. And a dark line in the soil across the entire planet, stamped with nanodiamonds that only a cosmic impact can create. Established geology, official academia, the sanitized textbooks, they all want you to see a planet that changes slowly, patiently, safely, over billions of years. Nothing sudden, nothing terrifying, nothing that could ever happen again. But the physical evidence at the crime scenes tells a terrifyingly different story. The Earth has a reset button. It has pressed it before, more than once. And the universe has absolutely no concern for weather that is convenient for our theories. If this video made you think, leave a like and subscribe. Tell me in the comments which of these 12 scars broke your brain the most, because we are just getting started. Until next time, stay sharp, stay skeptical, And never trust a textbook that tells you the sky cannot fall.